What if the fate of England was decided in a single day, on one muddy field, under a cold October sky? Not Britain, not an empire, just England itself, exposed, divided, and moments away from collapse. In 1066 AD, there was no emperor to save it, no professional army to defend it, only exhausted men, splintered loyalties, and sharp steel raised for the last time. They did not know it then, but the blood spilled that day would decide who spoke the language of power, who wore the crown, and who would rule England not just for years, but for centuries. 3 men believed the throne was theirs. One had the crown, one had the claim. One crossed the sea believing God was on his side. By nightfall, the field would be silent. The old England would be gone. And the question history still argues over is not who won, but whether England was saved at all, or quietly conquered in a way it never escaped. Because this was not just a battle. This was the day England changed hands, and most people don't realize it's still living with the consequences. To understand why 1066 mattered, you have to accept one brutal truth. England was strong, but it was never safe. For generations, the island had lived in survival mode. Viking ships on the horizon, rebellions smoldering at home, kings rising fast and falling faster. The crown did not rest on heads, it passed through hands like something dangerous. Claimed, lost, reclaimed, never secure, never truly accepted. England endured, but only by balance and exhaustion. At the center of this uneasy calm sat King Edward the Confessor. Edward was a holy man in a violent world, quiet, careful, more monk than monarch. He prayed, he built churches, and while England watched its borders and rivals carefully, it ignored the one question everyone was afraid to answer. What happens when Edward dies? Because everyone knew the truth. The king had no son, no named heir, no single law that defined who must rule next. In England, that meant something terrifying. Multiple men could believe the crown was theirs, and all of them could be right. So when Edward finally died, it wasn't just a king who vanished. The rules vanished with him. And into that silence, ambition poured in, fast, violent, and impossible to stop. By January 1066, England didn't have a king. It had a problem. 3 men now claimed the throne. Each believed God, law, or fate was on his side, and none of them intended to lose. The first was Harold Godwinson. Harold was the most powerful man in England who wasn't king. Wealthy, battle-tested, and ruthless enough to survive a brutal political world. He was Earl of Wessex, brother-in-law to the dead king, a man who understood English power better than anyone alive. The nobles trusted him, mostly. The army followed him, the people recognized his name. So when Edward died, the Witan moved fast, almost too fast. They crowned Harold king within hours. No debates, no delay. Legal if you accepted their interpretation of the law. Because England had no single rule for succession, only tradition. And tradition bends for powerful men. Harold took the crown, but in doing so, he made enemies and gave every rival outside England a perfect excuse. And while bells rang in Westminster, far across the sea, another man heard the news and began preparing to take what he believed had been stolen from him. William of Normandy, the man who would not forget. William was not English, he was Norman, and he remembered every insult, every betrayal, every debt. As a child, he had watched his guardians murdered in their beds. He had survived rebellions, assassination attempts, and a lifetime of constant war. By adulthood, William was forged into something lethal and resolute. He claimed that Edward had promised him the English throne years earlier. Even worse, he said Harold had sworn to honor that promise, an oath taken on holy relics. In medieval Europe, that wasn't politics, it was sacred, binding, a contract with God himself. To William, Harold was not a king. He was a liar, a thief, and that betrayal burned deeper than any blade could cut. But there was more. William didn't just seek revenge, he truly believed the throne was his. He believed that God had marked him to rule England, and anyone standing in that path, no matter how strong, no matter how English, would face the consequences.
Far across the channel, he prepared. Not for negotiation, not for compromise, but for conquest. Harald Hardrada, the Viking who refused to die quietly. If William was ambition, Harald Hardrada was pure violence. A giant of a man, scarred, missing a front tooth, a veteran of countless battles. He had fought across Russia, Byzantium, and the Mediterranean, everywhere, leaving a trail of conquest. He was a living legend, a Viking to the bone. Harold claimed England through Old Norse agreements, promises ignored by centuries of Anglo-Saxon kings. To him, England wasn't a kingdom, it was unfinished business, and the moment he set foot on the field, he would remind everyone why it belonged to no one who underestimated him. Unlike William, Harold didn't negotiate. He didn't wait. He came with axes, shields, and fury that had been honed over decades of war. Across the waters, three men now circled one another, Harold holding a fragile throne, William calculating his divine claim, and Harold bearing down like a storm. England was about to erupt, and nobody could predict who would survive the first blow. Harold Godwinson was crowned in January. By September, England was already burning. Harald Hardrada struck from the north with tens of thousands of battle-hardened Vikings. Villages were razed, homes set aflame. Resistance crumbled before axes and shields. Harold was forced into a brutal forced march, nearly 300 kilometers in days. Soldiers stumbled through mud, sweat streaked faces, and the constant ache of exhaustion. Horses faltered, men fell. Every step was a gamble between life and death. At the Battle of Stamford Bridge, chaos erupted. Steel clashed, arrows rained. Harald Hardrada fell with an arrow buried in his throat. The Viking tide broke. Blood soaked the earth. Mud clung to bodies. The old Viking age ended in fire, death, and mud. England was saved, barely. And at a terrible cost. Thousands lay dead, the army shattered, the land scarred, or so Harold thought, because while England bled in the north, William of Normandy was watching the winds across the channel, and he had not yet moved. For weeks, William waited. His army was ready, his ships were packed, his priests preached holy war. Even the Pope had blessed his cause. But medieval invasions depended on one thing: wind. And the wind refused him. Meanwhile, Harold relaxed. Soldiers feasted. Banners fluttered lazily over London. The king believed God was on his side. That was the mistake, because Harold didn't yet know the cost of the calm. Days passed, tension grew. Sailors cursed the sky, ropes creaked, horses stomped. The world held its breath. Then, in late September 1066, the wind changed and William sailed. William's fleet crossed the English Channel unopposed. No navy challenged him, no army waited on the beaches. He landed in Sussex, and he began building fortifications, towers rising from the sand, earthworks dug like teeth, traps hidden in every corner. Calmly, deliberately, like a man who planned to stay. Harold was still celebrating victory in the north when the news hit him like a hammer. Another invasion, another enemy, another march. Exhausted, undermanned, mud-caked, soldiers stumbling, scouts returning empty-handed. But king. Every mile south was a march toward the impossible. Harold turned toward destiny. When the messenger reached Harold Godwinson, the words must have felt unreal. William of Normandy had landed. Not raided, not scouted, landed. With horses, knights, priests, banners, and ambition. Harold had just crushed the greatest Viking warlord of his age. His army was exhausted, wounded, scattered across northern England. Many men had already gone home. Others could barely stand. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and smoke. Mud clung to boots. Rivers roared across their path. Screams of men struggling echoed in the distance. And yet Harold did not hesitate. He turned south. This was no casual march. It was a forced sprint across England, nearly 400 kilometers in less than 2 weeks. Men collapsed, horses died, armor blistered skin raw. Every step burned, yet Harold could not stop. He carried the weight of England on his shoulders, because every medieval king feared the same thing. If William was allowed to entrench, if castles went up, if reinforcements arrived, England would be lost without a battle. There was no second chance, so Harold gambled everything on speed. William, meanwhile, did the opposite. He did not rush. He did not chase Harold north. He did not panic. Instead, he burned. Norman troops ravaged the countryside around their landing site. Villages were destroyed. Timber screamed as it cracked and burned. Food stores vanished. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying the stench of fear. Civilians fled in terror. Soldiers muttered prayers. This was deliberate. William wanted Harold to see the flames, to feel the pressure, to come to him angry, tired, desperate, and it worked. Harold stumbled straight into William's trap. By mid-October, both armies stood near the small town of Hastings, but these were not equal forces. Norman cavalry gleamed in the sun. Archers lined their flanks. The English army? Steadfast, but outnumbered. Harold's men were mostly housecarls and furred. Housecarls, professional warriors, elite, heavily armored, wielding massive two-handed axes. Furred farmers and townsmen called up for duty, brave, loyal, but not professionals. They fought on foot, they trusted shields, they believed in standing their ground. Their tactic was simple and brutal: the shield wall. A solid wall of shields, overlapping, unbroken. Wood clanged against wood. Leather straps burned hands. The smell of sweat, iron, and earth filled the air. Feet dug deep into the soil. If it held, England lived. If it broke, England died. A young farmer gripped his shield with trembling hands, staring at the Norman banners. He had never fought beyond his village. Now the fate of England rested on his grip. William's army was something England had never faced before. Archers, infantry, heavy cavalry, relentless, organized, unstoppable. This was combined arms warfare, modern by medieval standards. Norman knights fought on horseback, lances leveled. Horses snorted and pawed the earth. The ground trembled under each charge. They could retreat, regroup, and strike with precision over and over again. Where the English were stubborn and immovable, the Normans were flexible, fast, and terrifying. Every feint, every cavalry maneuver threatened to crack the shield wall. One break, one hole, and England's defense could collapse in an instant. Harold chose the battlefield, a ridge later known as Senlac Hill, high ground, defensive, narrow frontage, perfect for a shield wall. The English formed up at the crest. Banners snapped in the wind, shields locked, axes ready. Armor clanked with every tense movement. They waited. William arrived and saw the position. He smiled, knowing every flaw in their line, because he had not come to fight fair. If the wall shattered here, the army would be swept down the slope. Before the bloodshed began, William made one last attempt at diplomacy. He sent envoys up the hill. Their message was clear: acknowledge William is king. Keep your lands, avoid destruction. Harold refused. He did not respond with words. He responded by tightening the shield wall. Shields clanged, dust swirled in the wind, men's breaths steaming in the cold. Tension coiled like steel. There would be no compromise, only bodies. The ridge would soon be littered with the fallen. The morning of 14 October 1066 dawned cold and clear. William ordered his archers forward. Arrows flew, a black rain of death. They rattled harmlessly off English shields. Some sank into the churned earth, others bounced away uselessly. No effect. Next came the infantry. They clawed uphill into a wall of axes and spears. A housecarl roared, swinging his axe, buying precious seconds for his comrades. Helmets split, men screamed, bodies tumbled. Still the shield wall held. Then William ordered the cavalry. Horses thundered uphill, hooves slipping in mud, men stumbling over fallen comrades, and failed again and again. The Norman right flank collapsed. Suddenly, a rumor spread like wildfire. William is dead. For a moment, everything teetered. If he fell here, the invasion would collapse instantly. But then, something extraordinary happened. William rode into the chaos. He lifted his helmet, eyes blazing, and shouted for all to see, "I live, and by God's grace, I will conquer." The shouts of knights rang over the clanging of axes. Horses steadied, soldiers straightened. The Norman line moved as one. It worked, and William adapted again and again. William did something radical. He ordered parts of his army to retreat, to turn and run. The English watched in disbelief. Shields glinted, axes gripped tighter, hearts raced. The enemy was fleeing. Against orders, against discipline, parts of the English line broke formation and chased them downhill. This was the moment William had been waiting for. The retreat was a lie. Horses thundered, cavalry wheeled. Axes and lances cut through the scattered English units mercilessly. Shields splintered, screams pierced the air. Dust and blood mixed underfoot. Again and again, a housecarl screamed, axe raised before a charging horse threw him to the ground. Each time, the shield wall grew thinner. Cracks appeared where once it had been unbroken. Soon, it would shatter entirely. By late afternoon, the English line was exhausted. Shields splintered, arms numb, ranks uneven. The men staggered, breath ragged, faces streaked with blood and sweat. Then came the moment history remembers. An arrow, whether by chance or design, struck King Harold. Some say the eye, some say the face, some that knights cut him down moments later. The truth is lost, but the result is not. Harold Godwinson, King of England, was dead. Housecarls froze, staring at the fallen king, knowing all was lost. And with him died the last hope of resistance. Once the king fell, everything collapsed. The English fought on, fiercely, stubbornly, but leadership was gone. Men stumbled, screaming for commanders who no longer existed. Norman cavalry cut down survivors as they fled. The field became a slaughterhouse. Bodies piled upon bodies. Smoke from burned villages curled into the sky. The scent of blood and iron hung heavy in the air. Bodies piled upon bodies. Silence fell on the ridge, broken only by the cries of the few survivors. By nightfall, England's army was destroyed. The battle was over, but England's transformation was just beginning. When the sun set on 14 October 1066, England lay broken. The field of Hastings was carpeted with bodies, Saxon and Norman alike, but it was the English who had lost everything. Their king was dead, their army shattered, their future uncertain. Saxon survivors huddled among the dead, unsure where to flee next. Smoke from burning villages mingled with a metallic stench of blood. William did not celebrate, not yet, because William understood something crucial. Winning a battle is easy. Conquering a country is hell. England was not Normandy. Its people did not want him. Its nobles did not trust him. The land had to be taken, village by village, road by road, soul by soul. And William was ready to do exactly that. Despite his victory, William was not yet king. London still stood, the English nobility still breathed, and surviving lords rallied around a final Saxon claimant, Edgar Atheling, young, royal, and English. For weeks, William advanced cautiously. He burned towns that resisted. He spared towns that submitted. This was strategy, not rage. Every fire was a message: obey or disappear. Smoke choked the air, and the clang of panicked shields echoed through the streets. By Christmas Day, 1066, William entered Westminster. There, in a ceremony thick with tension, he was crowned King of England. The crown touched his head. His heart was steady. He knew the city teetered between obedience and revolt. But even during the coronation, chaos erupted. The crowd shouted in English. The Norman guards panicked. They thought it was rebellion. Flames licked rooftops. Nearby buildings caught fire. William was crowned king as London burned. An omen, if ever there was one. William knew armies could be defeated. Ideas were harder. so he changed the land itself. Across England, wooden fortresses rose seemingly overnight. Motte and Bailey castles, brutal, ugly, functional, planted like daggers into the countryside. Smoke still curled from villages as the towers cast long shadows over fields once free. These were not homes. They were occupying forces made of wood and earth. From these castles, Norman lords ruled. Taxes were collected. Justice was enforced. Rebellion was crushed fast and publicly. The people watched in awe and fear, understanding their world had changed irreversibly. England had never seen anything like this, and the message was clear. This land is no longer yours. Your fields, your villages, your lives, all claimed by another. England did not submit quietly. Uprisings flared across the north. Smoke rose from burning villages, screams echoing through valleys. Danish fleets arrived to exploit the chaos. Old Saxon lords rose again, desperate and furious. They fought with fire and fury, knowing defeat would mean death or exile. William's response was not negotiation. It was annihilation. Total, unforgiving, absolute. Between 1069 and 1070, William unleashed terror. Villages burned, crops destroyed, livestock slaughtered, people starved, cities broken, souls terrified. From York to Durham, the land was turned into a wasteland. Smoke hung in the cold northern air, ash-coated fields once green. Contemporary chroniclers, not exaggerating, wrote of cannibalism among survivors. Survivors huddled among ruins, scavenging for scraps while soldiers marched on, indifferent. This was not war. This was punishment. William wanted the North broken so completely that rebellion would become unthinkable. And it worked. England learned fear. By 1086, William ordered something unprecedented, a complete survey of England. Every village, every field, every ox, every man. Royal scribes scoured the land, recording crops, livestock, and taxes as farmers watched, wary and awed. The result was the Domesday Book, named because its judgments were final, like the Day of Judgment itself. No secret remained, no corner uncounted. England itself had been catalogued, conquered by knowledge. For the first time in history, a king knew exactly what he owned. Every kingdom, every lord, every shire, all known, all measured, all accounted. And with that knowledge, England was no longer just a land to fight over. It was a land under rule.
The conquest didn't just change rulers, it rewired society. Saxon nobles were wiped out. Norman lords replaced them. French became the language of power. English became the language of peasants. Markets buzzed with French words, while peasants muttered Saxon beneath their breath. Children grew up speaking two worlds, one for survival, one for power. Beef on the table, cow in the field, venison to eat, deer to hunt. Norman words ruled. Saxon words survived. England was no longer purely English. Saxon survived, Norman prevailed. Something new was born. This brings us back to the question, did the Battle of 1066 save England? Without William, England may have fractured. Vikings may have returned. The island may never have centralized power. With William, England was unified, militarized, dragged into continental politics. The conquest was brutal. Rivers ran red, fields lay scarred, towns and walls rose from the ashes. It forged a state strong enough to endure centuries of war, empire, and transformation. Generations would remember the blood, the castles, and the new order they inherited. England survived, endured, paid in blood. When William wanted Hastings, he did more than defeat an army, he rerouted history. Because 1066 didn't just decide who ruled England, it decided what England would become. From this moment, rivers, roads, and kingdoms pulsed with new alliances, ambition, and blood-soaked conflict. England was no longer an isolated island kingdom on the edge of Europe. It was dragged violently into the continent's power struggles, wars, and ambitions. Generations would inherit a kingdom shaped by steel, fire, and ambition. It changed everything forever. Before 1066, English kings ruled with their nobles. After 1066, the king ruled over them. William centralized power like no English king ever had. Land was redistributed directly from the crown. Nobles became tenants, not partners. Loyalty was enforced, not negotiated. Fields, castles, and villages now bent under the crown's authority. Generations of Englishmen would grow up under a king who wielded power directly, not through negotiation or favor. This system, harsh, rigid, efficient, became the backbone of the English state. Strong kings, strong institutions, strong armies. England endured. It stopped being fragile.
Norman rule reshaped English law. Written records replaced memory. Royal courts expanded. Justice became standardized and ruthless. The king's peace mattered more than local custom. Scribes recorded disputes. Judges ruled over towns. Villagers learned that law now came from the crown, not tradition. Generations would grow up under rules set by conquerors, learning order from fear and structure. This laid the groundwork for common law, central courts, the modern legal state, all born from conquest. Ironically, a brutal conquest planted the seeds of stability. One of the quietest changes was the deepest: language. For centuries after 1066, power spoke French, peasants spoke English, law spoke Latin. Farmers muttered English in fields, while nobles conversed in French in castles, each word a marker of power and identity. Children grew up learning multiple tongues, inheriting a language forged in conquest and survival. But over time, these languages merged. The result? Modern English. Rich, flexible, global. A language built from conquest, shaped by kings, tempered by swords. William tied England's fate to Europe. English kings now owned land in France. Wars followed, claims followed, armies followed, flags flew, cannons roared, ships cut across oceans, all echoes of a crown claimed in 1066. The 100 Years' War, the rise of Parliament, the professional army, the navy, all threads lead back to 1066, because a centralized, militarized England eventually became something else: an empire. Generations would fight, sail, and govern, all on a stage set by one day, one battle, one king. From Hastings to Agincourt, Trafalgar, Waterloo, and beyond the seas, the road begins here, from Hastings to the world.
So now we return to the question that opened this story. Did the Battle of 1066 save England? The answer is uncomfortable. England was saved from collapse by being conquered. It lost its old identity to gain a stronger one. It traded freedom for order, tradition for power, peace for permanence. Old fields and villages burned, kings and peasants alike reshaped as England itself took on a new face. Generations would inherit both the order and the cost of that day. 1066 was not a victory. It was a transformation, and transformations never come gently. Today, the battlefield of Hastings is quiet. Grass sways over bones, wind whispers through empty air. Tourists walk where kings once fell, unaware. But England still lives in the shadow of that hill. Every institution, every law, every crown, all still echo the clash of shields. Even centuries later, the earth remembers the cost of crowns and conquest. One day, one battle, one decision. History didn't just move at Hastings, it turned. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the battle that shaped a nation, like this video if you value insightful historical storytelling. Subscribe to Time's Battlefield for cinematic, no-nonsense warfare. Share with someone who thinks history is boring. Prove them wrong. Comment below. Was England saved in 1066 or conquered forever? Your voice matters. Next, we'll explore another battle that changed the world forever. Until the next battlefield, Time's Battlefield.